Picture a Sunday afternoon, roughly 4 p.m. The light is hitting that specific angle in the living room, the one that signals the weekend is almost over. You're lying on the couch, phone in hand, thumb swiping up again and again. You're doom scrolling. You aren't even really reading the headlines anymore. You're just looking for something. Distraction. A hit of dopamine. Maybe you're feeling that familiar creep of anxiety, the Sunday scaries, right? The dread of the upcoming work week, even if you like your job. Or maybe you're looking around your comfortable home. You have the nice furniture, the stocked fridge, the safety, and yet you feel a distinct gnawing sense of emptiness. You wonder, is this it? Why am I bored? Why am I anxious? This feeling isn't a personal failure, and you are certainly not the only one feeling it. In fact, there is a psychological term for this specific state of chaos. It is called psychic entropy.
It's a concept popularized by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in his landmark book, Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience, and it explains the paradox of the modern American condition perfectly. See, we often assume our brains are like engines that naturally hum along in a state of order, but Csikszentmihalyi argues the exact opposite. He says the default state of the human mind, when it's left alone, without a task to focus on, is actually chaos, disorder. When you have nothing to do, your mind doesn't relax. It attacks itself. It wanders to your insecurities, your regrets, the things you forgot to do, the things you're afraid of. That is psychic entropy. It is information conflict in the consciousness, a lack of order. Think about how you feel after watching TV for 4 hours straight. You're sitting there, passive, letting the images wash over you. It feels relaxing in the moment because the flickering screen provides an external focus. It quiets the chaos for a bit. But when you turn it off, do you feel recharged? Do you feel alive?
Usually, no. You feel drained. You feel lethargic. You feel passive, weak, and irritable, as Csikszentmihalyi puts it. Now, compare that to a time you spent 4 hours working on something difficult that you actually care about. Maybe fixing an engine, writing a song, gardening, or even a really intense session of coding. You were working hard. You were expending massive amounts of energy. Yet, when you finished, you probably felt energized. You felt together. That is the mystery we are diving into today. Why is leisure often so exhausting and hard work so restorative? It turns out the moments that make life worth living aren't the passive, relaxing ones. They are the moments when we are stretched to our limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. So if you're tired of life slipping by in a blur of distraction, stay with me. In the next segment, we're going to define exactly what the alternative to entropy is, a state called flow.
That state, that feeling of being completely on, is what we are here to discuss. You are listening to The Last Read, Books for Your Ears, Wisdom for Your Life. Before we go any further, take a second to hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss the path to a better life, and we have a lot of ground to cover. The book is Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. Now, in the modern US, we often see this title on the shelves of the business section. We think of it as a manual for productivity, a way to squeeze more output out of our workdays. But to view it only through that lens is a tragedy. This isn't just a book about working harder. It is, quite literally, the blueprint for happiness.
We aren't just talking about checking boxes on a to-do list. We are uncovering that elusive state that athletes call the zone, musicians call the pocket, and Buddhists might call mindfulness. It's that strange, magical, conceptual space where the clock seems to vanish, where the nagging voice of the ego, that constant narrator in your head, finally goes silent. If you want to follow along, or if you realize you need this book on your nightstand, the link to buy it is right there in the description.
But here is the central mystery we need to solve.
Why is it that some people seem to move through life with a kind of effortless joy, even when they are doing difficult, demanding work? Why does the surgeon performing a 12-hour operation feel more alive than the billionaire sitting on a yacht? To understand this, we have to look at the man who discovered it, a man who didn't start his research in a comfortable university lab, but rather amidst the ashes of a broken continent. We need to meet the man who stared into the face of tragedy and asked, "What is left when everything else is gone?"
His name was Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and his story begins in a place that is hard for many of us to imagine. He grew up in Europe during the Second World War, amidst the falling bombs and the crumbling of nations. It was a time of absolute chaos. But for young Mihaly, the most terrifying part wasn't the war itself. It was what he saw happening to the adults around him. He noticed that men and women who were once successful, confident, and secure simply fell apart when their social structures were destroyed. Once their money, their jobs, and their status were stripped away by the war, they had nothing left. They dissolved into emptiness because they had relied entirely on the outside world to tell them who they were. And so, even as a prisoner in an Italian war camp, playing chess to find a moment of peace, Mihaly began to ask a dangerous question.
What is left when everything else is gone? What makes life worth living when there is no money, no fame, and no comfort? This question followed him all the way to America, to the University of Chicago. He didn't want to study rats in a maze. He wanted to study people who were happy, but not just happy in the way we usually think of it. He wanted to understand people who did difficult things for absolutely no external reward. He started interviewing a strange mix of characters. He spoke to painters who would spend days sweating over a canvas, only to stack the finished painting in a corner and never look at it again. He spoke to chess players who spent hours in intense concentration with no hope of prize money. He spoke to rock climbers who risked their lives scaling vertical walls of granite for nothing more than the feeling of the climb itself. And what he found shocked him. Whether they were composing a symphony or scaling a mountain, they all described the experience in the exact same way. They described a state of being where they were so involved in the activity that nothing else seemed to matter, where the ego fell away, and every action flowed inevitably from the previous one. They didn't do it for the applause. They didn't do it for the paycheck. They did it because the activity itself gave them a sense of order that the outside world could not provide. Mihaly called this state flow. But here is where we get it wrong. We often assume that this state feels like happiness or pleasure. We think it's like eating a chocolate bar or watching a good movie. But Csikszentmihalyi found that flow is actually the opposite of relaxing on your couch. To understand why, we have to learn the crucial difference between two words that we use interchangeably but mean completely different things: pleasure and enjoyment.
Pleasure and enjoyment. We tend to think these are synonyms, two words for the exact same feeling. But Csikszentmihalyi draws a hard line in the sand between them. Pleasure is contentment. It's what happens when a biological or social need is met. It's your body returning to a state of balance. Think of it like this. It's Friday night. You've had a long, draining week at work. You sink into the couch, grab a massive bucket of buttery popcorn, and zone out in front of the latest blockbuster movie. That is pleasure. It feels good. It restores you. It resets your baseline. But, and this is the critical part, it requires no psychic energy. You don't have to think. You don't have to focus. And most importantly, you don't grow. As Csikszentmihalyi puts it, pleasure helps to maintain order, but by itself, it cannot create new order in consciousness.
Now, contrast that with enjoyment. Enjoyment is active. It occurs when you exceed your programming, when you push past your previous limitations to accomplish something difficult. It's playing a grueling set of tennis against someone who is just slightly better than you, where you have to sprint for every single ball. It's sitting down to learn a new coding language, wrestling with the logic, and debugging a script until it finally runs. During the act of enjoyment, you might not even feel happy in the traditional, relaxed sense. You might be sweating, gritting your teeth, focusing so hard your head hurts. But afterward, you have changed. You have become more complex. Pleasure maintains the self, but enjoyment builds the self.
I want you to think back to your last weekend. Be honest with yourself. Did you spend it seeking pleasure or seeking enjoyment? Did you passively consume content or did you actively engage with the world? Because Csikszentmihalyi's research is clear. True long-term happiness isn't found in the popcorn bucket. It's found in the struggle. But this raises a practical question. You can't just go out and attempt something impossible and expect to feel flow. You'll just get crushed. And you can't keep doing the same easy task forever or you'll check out completely. There is a very specific mathematical relationship between how good you are at something and how hard the task is. It's a delicate balance, a narrow channel where the magic happens. And if you miss it, you end up in two places you definitely don't want to be: boredom or anxiety.
Picture a simple graph in your mind. On the bottom, the x-axis, you have your skill level. On the left, the vertical y-axis, you have the difficulty of the task or the challenge. This coordinate system is the core mental model of the entire book. It explains why some days you feel like a genius and other days you feel like you're drowning. Now, let's look at the corners. If you go to the top left, where the challenge is incredibly high, but your skill is low, you hit anxiety. You are overwhelmed. You don't have the tools to cope, so you panic. If you go to the bottom right, where the challenge is low, but your skill is very high, you hit boredom. You are overqualified. You're sleepwalking through the task. Csikszentmihalyi explains that flow doesn't happen in either of these places. It exists in a narrow, diagonal channel rising up through the middle, where high challenge meets high skill. The best way to visualize this is to think about driving a car.
Think back to when you were 16 years old, the very first time you sat behind the wheel. The challenge was massive. You had to watch the mirrors, the speedometer, the pedestrians, the stop signs, all while trying not to stall. Your skill level was basically zero. That wasn't flow. That was terror. That was the anxiety zone. Now, fast forward 10 years. You're driving to work on the same highway you've driven 1,000 times. You can do it with your eyes closed, though please don't. You are completely competent. Your skill is high, but the challenge is not existent. You aren't engaged. You're thinking about your grocery list. That is the boredom zone. But imagine you took that same car onto a Formula One track. Suddenly, you are taking corners at 100 miles an hour. The car is vibrating, the tires are screaming, and you need every ounce of those 10 years of driving experience just to keep the car on the pavement.
Your high skills are finally meeting a high challenge. The radio is off, the grocery list is gone. You are one with the machine. That is the flow channel. But here is the catch, and this is the part that most people miss. You cannot stay in the flow channel by standing still. As you practice, your skills improve. If you keep driving the race car at the same speed, eventually it becomes easy. You drift back into boredom. To stay in flow, you have to drive faster. You have to seek a harder challenge. As Csikszentmihalyi puts it, enjoyment appears at the boundary between boredom and anxiety. It's a moving target. You have to constantly escalate the complexity of the game to keep playing it. However, there is a problem with this model. You can have the perfect balance of skill and challenge. You can be ready to race the car. But if you don't know where the finish line is, or if you're even on the right track, the experience falls apart. To really hack this system, you need two more ingredients:
Those two missing ingredients are clear goals and immediate feedback. Think about why video games are so incredibly addictive, or why, if you play tennis, you can lose yourself on the court for hours. It's not just because they are fun, it's because they are engineered for flow. In a game of tennis, you know exactly what the goal is. Hit the ball over the net and keep it in bounds. And the moment you swing the racket, whack, you get immediate feedback. You know instantly if you succeeded or failed. You don't have to wait 3 weeks for a performance review to tell you if that backhand was on brand. The feedback is visceral. It is instant. Csikszentmihalyi writes that, in these activities, we know that every step of the way we are doing what needs to be done. Now, contrast that with your real life. You're sitting in an office on a Tuesday afternoon. You're working on a quarterly strategy report. What is the goal? Make it good. Well, that's vague. And the feedback? You might submit it today and not hear a word about it for a month. There is no whack. There is no scoreboard. This ambiguity creates what the book calls psychic entropy. Your mind starts to wander. You wonder if you're doing it right. You check your phone. You get anxious. The flow creates a vacuum and poof, the experience falls apart. So how do you fix this? How do you turn a vague, boring Tuesday into a flow state? You have to hack the system. You have to become the game designer of your own life. You need to take a massive, ambiguous task and slice it into micro goals that provide that immediate feedback loop. Csikszentmihalyi uses the example of a surgeon. A surgeon doesn't walk into the OR thinking, my goal is to save this human life. That is too big. It's too heavy. Instead, the surgeon's goal is, I need to make this incision exactly here. I need to clamp this specific artery.
When the blood stops, that is the feedback. Success. Move to the next step. You can do this with your email inbox. Don't say, I need to clear my email. Say, I bet I can answer these next 3 emails in under 5 minutes. Suddenly, you have a clear goal. You have a timer providing immediate feedback. You have turned a chore into a game. And this leads us to a bit of a paradox. If structure, goals, and rules are what create happiness, you would assume that our leisure time, when we are free to play games and sports, is when we are happiest. And you would assume that work, with its stress and obligations, is where we are most miserable. Well, Csikszentmihalyi ran the data. And what he found is so counterintuitive, it might actually make you angry. It turns out, we have been wrong about work and play the entire time.
He gave hundreds of participants electronic pagers, keeping in mind this study was conducted back in the 80s and 90s, and he instructed them to carry these devices everywhere for a week. At random intervals throughout the day, the pager would beep. The participants then had to immediately write down what they were doing and how they were feeling, rating their levels of engagement, focus, and satisfaction. The results were startling. The data showed that people reported being in a state of flow, that high-performance zone of engagement and clarity, far more often when they were at their jobs than when they were in their leisure time. Specifically, people experienced flow about 54% of the time while working, compared to only 18% of the time while engaging in leisure activities. Think about the implications of that. At work, despite the common complaint of, I hate my job or I'd rather be on the couch, the environment is actually engineered for happiness. It has the very components we discussed in the last segment: clear goals, rules of conduct, and immediate feedback. You have a deadline. You have a boss telling you if the report is good. You have a specific problem to solve. These external constraints force your attention into a unified beam. However, when these same people clocked out and went home, the structure collapsed. Without the scaffolding of work, their attention became diffuse. They reported feeling passive, bored, and surprisingly apathetic. They were watching TV or staring out the window, effectively waiting for something to happen to them rather than making something happen.
This creates the paradox of work.
Csikszentmihalyi noted that when people were signaled at work, even though they were in a high-flow state, they often said they would prefer to be somewhere else. They were denying their own experience because of a cultural narrative that says work is an imposition on our freedom and that leisure is the ultimate good. But when they actually got that leisure, they didn't know how to use it. So how do we solve this? How do we stop feeling like a prisoner at the office or a bored zombie at home? The answer lies in becoming what Csikszentmihalyi calls an autotelic personality. The word comes from the Greek auto, meaning self, and telos, meaning goal. An autotelic activity is one you do for its own sake, not just for the paycheck or the praise. An autotelic worker is someone who has the ability to transform a boring mandatory task into a complex flow activity simply by changing how they view it. Let's look at a practical example, perhaps something mundane like data entry or even washing the dishes. A non-autotelic person looks at a sink full of dirty dishes and thinks, "I have to do this to get a clean kitchen. This is a chore. I am bored." They are focused entirely on the outcome, and the process is just a painful hurdle. The autotelic person, however, hacks the system. They add artificial challenges. They might say, "Can I wash these plates without clinking a single one against the other? Or can I finish this entire stack in under 12 minutes, which is 10% faster than last night, while maintaining perfect cleanliness?"
Suddenly, the sink isn't a chore, it is an arena. Csikszentmihalyi tells the story of a factory worker named Rico. Rico's job was monotonous. He worked on an assembly line, repeating the same motion hundreds of times a day. Most people would go insane with boredom, but Rico approached his job like an Olympic athlete. He would privately time himself, seeing if he could shave seconds off his assembly of a specific unit, developing a rhythm and a grace that turned the mechanics of the line into a personal dance. Rico didn't wait for his boss to make the job interesting. He made it interesting by imposing his own internal goals and rules upon the external reality. He took control. And this is the secret to surviving the modern workplace. If you feel like a cog in a machine, it is likely because you are letting the external environment dictate your engagement. If you want to find happiness from 9 to 5, you must stop looking at your tasks as obligations and start looking at them as raw material for a game that only you are playing. But there is a danger here. While work provides a safety net of structure that helps us get into flow, our free time does not. When we are left alone, with no boss, no deadlines, and no immediate feedback, we face a different kind of threat. When the external pressure is removed, the unmastered mind doesn't just relax, it often begins to cannibalize itself. It drifts toward chaos, toward worry, toward what Csikszentmihalyi calls psychic entropy. And understanding why our minds turn dark when left unoccupied is the key to reclaiming your peace.
So, let's talk about that darkness. Csikszentmihalyi has a specific term for this state. He calls it psychic entropy. Now, entropy, if you remember your high school physics, is basically a fancy word for disorder, for chaos. Systems naturally degrade into randomness unless energy is applied to keep them organized. Well, Csikszentmihalyi argues that your mind works the exact same way. We tend to assume that our default mental state is peace, or maybe a neutral kind of relaxation, but it's not. The default state of the human mind, when left entirely to its own devices, without a task, without a goal, without something to focus on, is chaos. It is psychic entropy. Think about the last time you were sitting in a waiting room without your phone, or trying to fall asleep when you weren't quite tired. Where does your mind go? It rarely drifts to how wonderful your life is. It usually drifts to what you forgot to do, that slightly awkward thing you said to your boss 3 years ago, or some vague anxiety about the future.
When we don't control our attention, it naturally bleeds into worry. It focuses on the things that are wrong, because from an evolutionary standpoint, that's what kept us alive. But in the modern world, it just makes us miserable. This is why flow is so critical.
Csikszentmihalyi describes flow not just as fun, but as the ordering of consciousness. It is the opposite of entropy. It is structure. And this brings us to the most valuable resource you possess. It isn't your time, it's your attention. In an age where every app, every notification, and every advertiser is fighting a war for your eyes, mastering your attention is the only way to keep that entropy at bay. Think of your attention like a flashlight beam in a pitch-black room.
Whatever you point that flashlight at, that becomes your reality. If you let the beam swing around wildly, fueled by every beep and buzz from your pocket, your reality becomes fragmented. It becomes chaotic. You feel scattered because your reality is scattered. But if you take the handle of that flashlight and you hold it steady on one thing, whether that's writing a report, painting a canvas, or even just listening to a friend talk, the chaos recedes, the room gets quiet. That is the ordering of consciousness. That is happiness. You have to be the one holding the flashlight. You cannot be a slave to the notifications. So the question becomes, how do we make this permanent? How do we become the kind of person who naturally imposes this order, regardless of what is happening around us? Csikszentmihalyi says there is a specific type of personality that masters this. He calls it the Autotelic personality, and becoming one might just be the ultimate goal of the book.
Autotelic. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But the concept is actually quite beautiful. It comes from two Greek words, auto meaning self, and telos meaning goal. So an autotelic person is someone whose goals come from within, not from the outside. They don't do things just for money or fame or because their boss told them to. They do things for the sake of the activity itself. They find the reward in the doing. Csikszentmihalyi gives us this incredible example in the book, a man named Rico Medellin. Now, Rico worked in a factory. His job was on an assembly line, performing the exact same task 600 times a day. Most of us would look at that and think, nightmare. We'd see it as soul-crushing boredom. But Rico loved it. Why? Because he didn't see it as a chore. He approached his job like an Olympic athlete. He would set private goals for himself, checking his speed, trying to beat his record from the day before, shaving off seconds here and there. He turned a mundane, repetitive task into a high-stakes game. He created complexity where there was none.
That is the Autotelic personality. It's the ability to transform a potential threat, or just plain boredom, into an enjoyable challenge. And this leads us to the most profound point of the entire book, and perhaps the most important thing you can take away from this series. We often think happiness is a destination. We think, if I just win the lottery, if I just get that promotion, then I'll be happy. But Csikszentmihalyi is telling us, no, that's not how it works. External events, even the great ones like winning $1 million, don't determine our happiness. What determines our happiness is how we interpret reality. You have the power to turn a traffic jam into a moment of solitude. You have the power to turn a difficult conversation into an exercise in empathy. You have the power to turn a boring report into a masterpiece of clarity. It's not about changing the world around you. It's about changing the order of your consciousness. You can create flow anywhere. You can be the master of your own attention. And when you do that, when you stop waiting for the world to make you happy and start creating order within yourself, that is when you win. I really hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into flow. It's one of those books that can genuinely change the way you experience every single minute of your day. If you want more insights like this, if you want to keep building that wisdom, make sure you're subscribed to The Last Read. We've got plenty more to cover. And of course, if you haven't read the book yourself yet, please do. There is so much more in there than we could ever cover here. Check the link in the description to grab a copy. Go find your flow.